Fraker had often mused this same city planner had to be a dedicated car-hating cyclist. "Yeah, I hate flying me," Charlie lamented. "I much prefer boats." "I mean, you've never heard of a boat crashing into a mountain, have you?" "This is true," Randall had to admit. "Yeah," said Fraker for argument's sake. "But I've also never heard of a plane sinking, either." He spotted a cyclist up ahead and had to fight the urge not to knock him off. Besides, cycling in this weather was punishment enough. "This is also true," Randall said. "Yeah," said Charlie. "Except for that film." "Oh, what was it called?" He screwed his face up trying to remember the lost cinematic gem. "Oh yeah. It was one of those airport flicks from the 70s. Airport 78, this time it sinks." "Sinks or stinks?" Fraker asked. "Have to say, I didn't catch that one," Randall said. "Nar, me neither," Charlie said. "Well, I mean, you wouldn't, would you? Not with title like that." Wow, thought Randall settling back in his seat, Israel would hate these two, which made him like them all the more. They were everything the demon hated about humanity, something the demon would never have, but also he had to admit all Randall had lost. Though unlike the airport, Randall felt at ease around these guys, and in just the space of a few short minutes he knew he'd made the right decision enlisting their help, apart from the practicalities of the situation, which made it a sound tactical move. Sometimes mortal people could have their uses, they could be used, manipulated against one another. But also, as with Charlie Walker and Bill Fraker, they could be fun to be around in small numbers. And in the end, wasn't being evil supposed to be fun? Somehow he'd forgotten that along the way. He watched the back of Fraker's head as he shook it in obvious disbelief at his partner. "You'll have to forgive Charlie, Randall," he said. "He used to deliberately bang his head in the door when he was a child." Randall laughed out loud for the second time in 5 minutes, then realized he couldn't actually remember the last time he had laughed properly at all. Israel was never one for witty quips. He nearly died, again, when Charlie said with an amazingly straight face, "Still do." Fraker cursed under his breath and the car swerved ever so slightly. "Sorry," he said. "Fucking road system. And nothing at all to do with your driving, William?" Charlie said. He easily dodged as Fraker made a half-hearted attempt to clip him around the head. "Jesus, both hands on the wheel. Your driving's bad enough as it is." He turned and grinned at Randall. "I take it this isn't your usual line of work. Babysitting Americans?" Randall asked. "Yeah, sorry. I know we're babbling a bit. Just a bit nervous, that's all," Fraker said. "To be honest, we don't usually get involved with this type of thing." He cursed himself, then added quickly. Not that we know what this type of thing is, you understand." He glanced in the rear-view mirror and was relieved to see Randall smiling back at him. "Don't sweat it," Randall said. "You'll do just fine. And believe me, you two make a refreshing change to the type of company I normally keep. You're quite the double act. You should catch our kneecap routine," Charlie said proudly. "But for Christ's sake, don't get him started on coffee," Fraker said. "I'll bear that in mind," Randall said. "So, what do you do when you're not babysitting?" Fraker thought for a moment. "I suppose you could say we're in collections." This made Randall smile. "That's funny, so am I. Apparently, some fuckwit once wrote, 'It is always darkest just before the dawn.' Well, if that was the case, then pretty damn soon there was going to be the brightest dawn the world had ever seen. But that day was not today." For the second time in just a few short days, Larry McCulloch wanted to burst into tears. Just let it all out, either that or burst out laughing at the absurdity of it all. Something, once upon a time he would have found it quite easy to do, what with all this talk of demons and devils. Of soul collectors after Larry's hide because he had double-crossed the devil's own. Laughable, were it not for the fact that those around him, all grown-ups no less, believed every single surreal word of it. Larry was back in the dubious sanctuary of his room. He sat on his bed as he scrolled through his phone's address book in an increasingly vain attempt to find somebody, anybody he could call to get him out of this river of shit he was drowning in. He had tried half a dozen numbers already, old cronies of his he had relied on in the past, but of those only one had actually deigned to answer, damn call IDs once they knew it was him on the other end. And that one, Henry Ritter, had just screamed abuse down the phone at him and told him in no uncertain terms that he was a dead man walking. Then added, worse than dead. That again. What in Christ's name could be worse than dead? If anything, Larry was beginning to think that he might be better off out of it altogether. Just wrestle a gun off Lewis or the kid Jeff and blow his sorry brains out and let that be an end to it. Then if all this was true, he could meet the devil head on and tell him to go fuck himself. Larry made his hand into the shape of a gun and cocked his thumb back and put his fingers in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Blam, that's all she wrote, thank you and good night. Not much of a legacy, blowing your brains out all over the cheap wallpaper, but at least it would be quick and at least he would find out what, if anything, was waiting for him on the other side. Bollocks to it, Larry said out loud. Suicide just wasn't in his nature. He was many things, but he sure as shit wasn't a quitter. No, come what may, he was going to see this through until the bitter end, and he had the feeling it would be just that, bitter. 1:30 he tossed the phone on the bed. The only number he hadn't tried today was Tommy Whitaker's and he was too sober even to think about calling that nutter. He turned hearing a tap on the door. Go away, he said. The last thing he needed right now was Lewis or the priest. Larry, it's me, Jeff. The voice sounded miles away through the closed door. I come bearing gifts, he added. Larry let out a weary sigh and dragged himself up and over to the door. It was only now he realized the room was in near total darkness. He checked his watch. Christ, 8:30 p.m. He flicked on the light switch and leaned against the door but didn't move to open it. Define gifts, he said to the wood. Well, gift to be precise. Come Larry, open the door. You've been up here for hours. Oh, and let's just say this gift is 12 years old. Now that got Larry attention. He opened the door a few inches and a bottle of whiskey appeared through the gap, so Larry opened it further and stepped back to let Jeff enter until he was standing in the doorway, his fresh-faced features at odds with the bottle of whiskey he was flaunting. So, can I come in? Jeff asked. Larry took the bottle and gestured for Jeff to come in. As long as you don't interfere with my drinking, he said. Okay, deal, Jeff laughed and came inside. And definitely no preaching, Larry added. That's Father Nichols' territory, not mine. I'm a mere minion. I just thought you looked like you could probably do with a drink after the day you've had. Ha, no shit, Larry said and uncorked the bottle. He scooped up his glass and poured himself a generous measure before putting the bottle on the bedside table. Just keep it to yourself though, Larry. Father Nichols is worried about your drinking as it is, Jeff said. Looking after my liver as well as my soul, eh? Larry said, which raised a smile from the kid. Something like that. Larry raised the glass and took a sip. Damn, it was good stuff. No cheap supermarket owned brands here. The kid must have spent 30 quid on it. Larry couldn't help but muse if he could claim it back on expenses with the Vatican. Larry took another sip and studied Jeff. So what's your story, kid? He asked. Jeff frowned. Story? Yeah, I get Nichols and even Peroni, they're Vatican soldiers, if you believe in all this. They want to save my soul, and catch the bogeyman in the process, no doubt. I definitely get Lewis, he's a copper through and through and probably fell in with these religious types because he gets to carry a gun. But you? He made a point of looking the young man up and down, which made him squirm somewhat. You don't seem like the religious type to me, he gestured to the bottle as evidence. Besides, what are you, 18? I'm 24, Jeff said with the weariness of someone who had been cursed with youthful looks all his adult life and the lack of credibility it inevitably brought. Larry raised an eyebrow just to goad him. No, really, Jeff protested. And you really believe in this heaven and hell shit the padre is spouting? Yes, Larry, yes I do. Jeff answered with conviction. You've seen any evidence of it? Larry asked and drained his glass, which brought with it that familiar warm sensation you get from good whiskey, and it felt damn fine. The kid shook his head and his cheeks flushed slightly. Not as such, no, he said. But I have faith in Father Nichols and his team back at the Vatican. This made Larry raise his eyebrows again. No, really, I do. I may not have seen any of this firsthand, but I've seen the Vatican archives. They're quite an eye-opener. Then we get an intensive crash course. So, Larry asked. How did they get you? I was training to be a priest. It's a calling I have felt ever since I can remember. Then I was approached whilst at the seminary. Jeff looked away for a moment, seemingly embarrassed. Then we added with genuine humility, they said they saw something in me, something special. So I joined the team, as it were. They apparently call us the God Squad on the other side. Ha, Larry snorted. Religious mumbo jumbo, all of it. He motioned to Jeff's pistol in the holster under his jacket. That's what I believe in, kid. I'd put my faith in that over Jesus H. Christ any day. He was surprised that the comment seemed to hurt Jeff, and with it came even more surprise at himself that he instantly regretted it. The kid was an easy target, he'd spotted that the moment they had met. He was young, 24, really? The poor sap was doomed to be ID checked at nightclubs until he was at least 30, if he lived that long, and impressionable, but now he saw, that even for all Larry's cynicism, the lad had a heart of gold. The whiskey proved that. He was making a genuine attempt to connect with him. Regardless of what Larry believed, Jeff had sworn to protect him, and with his young life if need be. But not for profit, which Larry would have felt far more comfortable with. But with faith in what he was doing. Larry swiped up the bottle and took a swig straight out of it, and it was Jeff's turn to raise an eyebrow. Christ, Larry silently cursed, this situation was messed up. What was happening to him? He almost felt like apologizing to the kid. Now he knew he was at a low ebb. He tried to shake of the feeling and just held up the bottle to toast Jeff. Thanks for the drink anyway, was all he could think to say. No big deal, Jeff said with a shrug. It's like I said, I just felt bad for you. You've been through a lot lately. I know you've got this hard man exterior, but it can't be easy for you. Larry's heart turned back to stone in an instant. I don't need your sympathy, he said, his voice ice cold. Things were really fucked up if this know-nothing brat was feeling sorry for him, good heart or not. Again Jeff looked like Larry had just slapped him in the face. But this time Larry would be damned if he would allow himself to feel sorry for him. If anything, Larry was embarrassed at his own moment of weakness for feeling anything at all for this kid. Who, he had to remember, was just one in a long line of people to be used to get him out of this shit he was in. He was nothing more than a pawn, they all were. Christ. He cursed out loud. Must be getting soft in my old age, he thought. Larry didn't have to look directly at the kid to tell he had his mouth open ready to speak, but he cut him off before he could. Like I said, kid, thanks for he drink, but now fuck off, will you? This whiskey won't drink itself and I've had enough of you. You, God squaters today to last me 2 fucking lifetimes. Although his voice had a hard edge to it, Larry still couldn't bring himself to look at Jeff's reaction. Okay, Jeff said softly, but he still lingered by the door. We'll get you out of this, Larry. You can count on us. Larry just stared at the bottle in his hand, which he was desperately trying to stop shaking. But he had to bite his lip when Jeff added before leaving, "We love you, Larry. Good night." Larry screwed his eyes tight shut and fought to keep control until finally he heard the door shut and he was alone again, and with it he collapsed on the bed. He had to bury his head deep into his pillow to muffle the sobs that came bursting out of him. He couldn't stop them now even if he wanted to, so he just let them come.